over 100 teams have built cars to race in the Formula 1 World Championship since its inception in 1950. And don't worry if you can't remember all of them. In those intervening 70 years, only 15 have won the Formula 1 Constructors Championship, which, in true terms, is a worse than 85% failure rate. Picking the most successful teams then needs some criteria. 6 teams have won a single championship each, so we're discounting them, which leaves us with 9 teams boasting 56 titles between them. But who tops the pile? And if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe if you'd like more from Goodwood Road and Racing. Perhaps it isn't surprising that Ferrari tops this list. It has started more Grand Prix than any other constructor, by more than 100. It also started racing in Formula 1 8 years before any other team on this list, and 16 years before any other team still competing with them. It has also won more races than any other, had more 1-2 finishes, more podiums, more pole positions, more fastest laps, and won more points than any other team in Formula 1 history. Amazingly though, it took Ferrari 4 seasons to win its first constructors title after the crown was invented in 1958. That first title was secured in 1961 by the American-German duo of Phil Hill and Wolfgang von Trips, and with it came a driver's crown for Hill, without racing at the final race in the US after von Trips tragically lost his life in the penultimate round in Italy. Since then, Ferrari's championship victories have come in sprees. It clinched crowns through the 1970s with the likes of Niki Lauda, Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve, and then a couple more in the early 80s with Villeneuve again. But it would then be nearly 2 decades before Ferrari held aloft the trophy again. It took the force of nature that was the Ross Brawn, Jean Todt, Michael Schumacher trio to restore Ferrari to glory. At which point, they went ahead and won almost everything in sight. Since then, it's been another dry spell for the prancing horse, with the new forces of Mercedes and Red Bull coming to control the 2010s. It is Williams' entry to this list that might be the most amazing streak of all. The team from Grove in Oxfordshire only entered its first race as a constructor in 1977, but had won its first title by 1980 and won 8 more over the next 17 years. The period of dominance also saw titles for legends including Alan Jones, Nelson Piquet, Keke Rosberg, Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost, Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve. Behind the scenes, Williams has also been filled with famous names. The pen of Patrick Head helped to spawn most of the early winners, and he was followed by Adrian Newey, a man whose name has become synonymous with building incredibly rapid racing cars. But after Newey left and Villeneuve helped win the 97 crown, Williams checked out. It is still racing today, but aside from a period of competitiveness with BMW in the early 2000s, Williams has never been a true contender since. But Frank Williams' incredibly British team continues to be a fan favourite no matter what. It is perhaps because Williams' dominance coincided with the rise of really televised Formula 1 around the globe, or just because of the fiercely independent nature of the team that Williams continues to grab the attention, despite being stuck right at the very back of the field. Here you will find perhaps the biggest disparity between winning constructors' titles and winning drivers' titles. McLaren actually sits second on the all-time list of drivers' titles with 12, only 3 shy of Ferrari's total of 15. But the ethos of McLaren appears to have always been geared toward that top-line individual championship glory. While it has won the drivers' title while missing out on constructors' glory 4 times, McLaren has never won the constructors' title without the help of a drivers' champion, unlike Ferrari, for whom that became a regular feature in the 1970s and 1980s. McLaren's dominance really came through the late 1980s and early 1990s. In that period, with Gordon Murray involved and Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna leading the charge, McLaren won 6 titles in 8 years, including 4 on the trot. It resumed its place at the front of the field in 1998, clinching the title as well as the driver's crown for Mika Häkkinen. But since then, McLaren hasn't won a Constructors' crown, and has in fact won only one since 1991. In that time, McLaren has won the 2008 driver's title with Lewis Hamilton and a second title for Mika Häkkinen in 1999, but for both of these, it was beaten to team's glory by Ferrari. Fallow years have followed recently, but with a promising pairing of Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris, perhaps things are looking up again. For a team so important to the history of F1 in engineering terms, 7 titles sounds like a pretty paltry return for Lotus. But, like Williams and McLaren, Lotus won all its constructors' crowns in a quick blitz. But unlike the other British teams, it then faded and burned out. The genius of Colin Chapman helped Lotus become the team to beat in the 1960s and early 1970s, much to the chagrin of Enzo Ferrari. Powered by Ford and Cosworth's mighty DFV, the lightweight Lotus brand would become masters of the aerodynamic arts with the incredible Lotus 72, before transforming Formula One by harnessing ground effect. From then, Lotus continued to innovate and introduce some incredible names to Formula One, but it never managed to climb back to the top of the tree. Its last title for both drivers and constructors came in 1978 with Mario Andretti, and then, other than some wins, that was pretty much it for Lotus. Sure, it would launch names like Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna onto the F1 map, but there would be no more titles. Lotus folded in the early 1990s, still trying to innovate, but struggling for cash. 2 more teams have taken the Lotus name since, with one even receiving some backing from the car firm, which still remains a going concern. But neither was really worthy of the name. There is a legitimate argument to be made that both Brawn and Tyrrell's single constructor crowns could be included into this legacy. But officially, the Mercedes team has just the 6 F1 titles to its name. There are 2 reasons for this. Firstly, Merck's first dominant period in F1 came before the invention of the World Constructors title. In the 1950s, the great Juan Manuel Fangio won 2 titles driving Mercedes, but there was no constructors' crown to win then. Secondly, after the 1955 Le Mans disaster, Mercedes decided to quit motorsport, and the name wouldn't return to F1 as a constructor until 2010. When they did come back, though, having purchased the Brawn team that used to be Honda, that used to be BAR, that used to be Tyrrell, they did it hard. A few fallow years at the start were merely marking time while the rule sets changed and hybridization arrived, lulling the opposition into a bit of a false sense of security. When the rules changed, there was no stopping them. Since the debut of the V6 hybrid engines in 2014, it has clinched the Constructors' title every season, and Lewis Hamilton has won 6 of the available drivers' crowns, with the other one going to teammate Nico Rosberg. Red Bull hardly seems to have been in Formula One for more than 5 minutes. But it's a measure of the intent shown by the drinks manufacturer to take things seriously that it sits 6th on the all-time F1 list already. Red Bull is another team that can trace its ancestry back through a few other teams, but in this case not quite to the level that Merck can, with Tyrrell having history way back to the early days of F1. Red Bull arrived in Formula One in 2005, buying the Jaguar team from a desperate-to-sell Ford. When Red Bull arrived, it meant business, and hired the aforementioned Newey immediately. He produced a series of striking but ultimately uninspiring cars until, as with so many changes in teams' fortunes, came a major rules reset. In 2009, the absolute glut of aerodynamic tech that had begun to festoon the cars was largely dismissed, leaving little wiggle room for the designers. The conditions were perfect for a team with a genius like Newey at the helm. A man who could find the sort of marginal gains that the newly restrictive rules meant you had to look for. Teamed up with a young and fired-up Sebastian Vettel, it won 4 titles on the bounce, setting the kinds of records we thought we'd never see again, until Mercedes arrived. Indeed, in 2011, the 2 Red Bull cars started on pole in 18 of the 19 races. They would win only 12. Many of these teams have won a series of titles by taking a change to Formula One's rulebook and finding the sweet spot. Cooper, on the other hand, just built something no one had seen before. In 1959, no world champion drivers were on the grid, following the death of Mike Hawthorne and the retirement of Juan Manuel Fangio. Vanwall, which had won the first F1 Constructors title in 1958, also withdrew, leaving Ferrari as the only remaining race-winning team on the grid. But they were all beaten by a small team from Surbiton, which brought along a complete revolution in the way Formula One cars were built. Cooper had effectively reversed the F1 car, sticking the engine behind the driver rather than the other way round. With its revolutionary new cars, Cooper won 5 races, driven by Jack Brabham, Sterling Moss and Bruce McLaren, and Brabham would also win the driver's crown. The following year, both Brabham and Cooper would do it again. Cooper won 7 of the 10 F1 races that season. At the Indy 500, Cooper turned up with a car that was widely mocked on arrival, but started exactly the same rear-engine revolution as it had done in F1. Founder Charles Cooper died in 1964, and son John Cooper sold the company in 1965. It would win 1 race in 1966 with John Surtees and another in 1967 with Pedro Rodriguez before bowing out after a single race in 1969. We've met Black Jack Brabham with Cooper, winning 2 titles in those magic little rear-engine machines. Well, when he was done with that, he went off and founded his own team. And with that team, he went on to win another driver's title, his 3rd, in 1966, and the Constructors' Crown. The following season, he was joined by Denny Hulme at the wheel of the Repco-engined Brabham. Hulme promptly won his first and only F1 title, and Brabham won its 2nd Constructors' Crown. It would not win another. Following a few years in the wilderness, Brabham would go on to win 2 more drivers' titles in the 1980s, after future F1 Supremo Bernie Ecclestone had bought the team and brought in design guru Gordon Murray and Brazilian driver Nelson Piquet. But it failed to add the Constructors' title both times. Ecclestone eventually lost interest in the team and sold it on, after which Brabham dropped sharply to the back of the grid, its only real notable achievement after 1985 being launching the F1 career of Damon Hill. Another team for which you could potentially claim more titles. The current Renault team is the former Lotus, which is the former Renault, Benetton and Toleman teams. Renault has had several cracks at F1. First back in the 1970s and 80s, then again in this title-winning period in the 2000s, before returning, buying back the same team for its current foray in Formula One. So far, only one of those attempts has borne championship fruit. With the mix of Fernando Alonso's driving skill, Pat Simmons' design talent and the sheer force of nature that is Flavio Briatore at the helm, the 2005 and 2006 titles were clinched, breaking the Schumacher-Ferrari hold on Formula One, and becoming the first team to win the title with a car not designed by Adrian Newey or Rory Byrne since 1991. Since then, things haven't been quite so kind to the part government-owned Renault brand in F1. It supplied engines to Red Bull for its run of 4 titles in the early 2010s, but has never managed to find the same success again with its own built cars. These, then, are the most statistically successful teams in F1 history. But which is the greatest in your eyes? Let us know in the comments below.